Welcome back to Good Day. It's time for Mother Knows Best. We're talking about discipline this morning. So, do you think discipline is effective, and what types of strategies do you use to discipline your kids?
Well, I think first of all, it's important that discipline matches the crime. It doesn't make sense if if the kid was roughhousing in the house to then take away, say, computer privileges. I mean, it should relate, and I think it should be quick. You don't just kind of put off the offense and a week later say, oh yeah, remember last week when you did such and such. Sometimes things happen, they're not convenient, and we don't want to discipline right away, but it sends a double message to the kids, and they never know then, well, gee, what am I going to get corrected for and when?
Well, I think what you're saying is natural consequences or logical consequences.
Absolutely.
So if you tell your child 5 nights in a row, don't leave your bike outside, and on the 6th night the bike is stolen, then they're just going to have to live without a bike for a little while, because that's a logical consequence. Now, I think that things kind of change as you go from children to grandchildren, because I remember when my children were small, we did have a wooden spoon, which was more for effect than anything. You could just mention the wooden spoon and everybody would straighten up. But then, of course, as grandchildren are born, no, I'm not going to spank my grandbaby.
Yeah, right.
They're precious, wonderful angels, and they don't deserve it. So.
Well, I'm not going to argue with the precious, wonderful thing, but I think you're right. I don't think it's a grandparent's role. I think it really is a parent's role.
I don't want the moms to spank them either.
Oh,
okay. I don't want to see them be spanked. That's the whole thing. Because they're my grandbabies.
It's both of the roles, but grandparents do tend to forget about discipline,
Yes,
and I'm
do.
pretty sure I'm going to be that way when it's my turn to be a grandparent. But discipline is very important, and it is very important to back up what you say, because we do get into the role of if you don't, I'm gonna, if you don't, I'm gonna, and we don't, so it's very important to back up what you say with your children, and like you said, let the punishment match what the crime was, and don't say you're gonna do something and then a week later, because you're agitated, go ahead and just pile up the charges and give them Trump charges, like they say in the courts, I guess. But I do believe in discipline. We do, as parents, get a little lazy sometimes, and we don't want to. And then the kids, they've learned the art of the guilt trip. They learned how to put on the pouty faces and make you feel bad about it. And then you have a lot of parents that want to be their kid's friend, and they don't want them to not like them and so forth, and you don't want them to be upset. But it's important for your kids to understand that there are repercussions for your actions. So I'm all for it.
I have to say, going back to your leaving the bike out for 5 nights, see, that wouldn't happen.
No.
If I told my kids the second night, don't leave your bike out, if that bike's not gone, there's consequences.
Yeah.
So how do you change, because as they get older, discipline changes in some form, so how do you know when it's time to switch over from one form of discipline to the next?
When they ask for the whipping.
Or they laugh at you.
When they ask for the whipping, because it got to the point when my mom told me, all right, Bridget, no TV for 5 days. Can I just have a whipping? Because, you just want the sting of the hand. At least you can watch TV after that. And my daughter did that one time, when I told her, I said, okay, you and TJ, y'all have got to go, and y'all have got to just spend the rest of the day. Can I just get a whipping, Mama? So when they ask for the whipping, okay, it's time for you to start grounding, taking away the cell phone. So that was one of my key indications right there.
But I also think that if you spank, I mean, we do spank, but we always found that if you do that when the kids are younger, you don't need to do that as they get older. If you've already established effective obedience and things like that, that you don't need to do it when you're older.
You're right.
And definitely if they're asking for it.
Don't give it to them.
That's right.
That is so funny. What do you do if your kids start to rebel and they're not, even if you discipline them, they're still just doing their own thing?
Oh gosh, holy water.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
It is.
It's hard.
Because there's a certain amount of it that is kind of them just testing their limits and their abilities and things like that. But I'll be honest with you, it's a case-by-case kind of thing. You know your kids best, and
Talk.
We'll be back in just a moment to learn more about what they think about discipline. Stay with us. We'll be right back. This morning, and we left off kind of talking about what do you do if you discipline your kids but they continue to rebel and the discipline doesn't seem to work at all. What do you do?
There's an underlying issue.
Yeah.
and you need to find out what's going on. Yeah, you know, thank God I have not had any major issues with any of my children rebelling, you know, to the point where it was uncontrollable. But there have been times when it seemed like we just couldn't get across to them. Or Travis and I had to just sit down and say, okay, tell me what's going on. And our children have told us that there were things that they were facing at school, things that children were saying to them or their friends were questioning them about. And it took them some time to go ahead and tell them, because in some instances they were embarrassed to come to us about it. And we forget as parents that we were their age at one time too, and there are some things that you're just embarrassed to come to your parents about, because you feel like your parents are older and they're not as cool and they won't understand. And sometimes we get angry with our kids and we feel like, okay, well, they're just being hard-headed, but they have feelings too, and they have these emotions and these hormones, and they feel like we don't understand, but you have to just keep at them until they are willing to come to you and talk to you about it.
Because I think rebellion really springs from, you know, feeling like they can't talk to their parents for whatever reason. Either their parents, I mean, in a busy society like we are now, it's just really easy to, oh, wow, I didn't talk to the kids this week. I mean, and which is terrible. But we do that, and you know, it's a relationship, and it requires time and attention. And just because they're kids doesn't mean they don't need that as well. They probably need it more so.
Yeah.
And rebellion usually springs from, well, I can't talk to my parents. They're either too busy, or they don't understand, or they don't, you know, want to talk to me. Some kids don't feel like their parents like them, you know, which happens. But I think when you have those communication lines established at a younger age and have worked at it, the chances of them rebelling are less. I'm not saying, you know.
The kids are so much more sophisticated now than when my children were growing up. You know, my grandchildren that are 14, 15, and 16, they're always connected to something, and they know so much more, and they're so much more sophisticated. And I think they do think they're grown more.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a plus and a minus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't really saying it as a plus. I'm saying it more as a minus. Because I think they do grow up too fast that way. And that makes them think, well, I know more than Mom because of this. And so that kind of throws into the mix, too.
You all had mentioned spanking earlier. Nowadays, people, you know, are very touchy on that subject. Are you ever afraid to let people know that you spank your kids, or has it ever, you know, how do you feel about the situation with people being so funny about it?
I think education is the key. There's nothing wrong with spanking your children, but there's everything wrong against abusing your children. And it's very important to know the difference. I have a problem with people cursing their children out, especially in public. I mean, that's abuse. I mean, you know, abuse goes beyond also putting your hands on your child. There's verbal abuse and emotional abuse. But you know, disciplining your children is very important in every aspect of life. But you have to know, your children have to know that if you act out in public, you're going to be disciplined in public. And that's not also always spanking your children in public. It may be correcting them. Okay, sit down, or you're going to get it when you get home, or I'm going to take away your TV or your game. And parents, they feel like if somebody else hears it, because you've heard so many reports in the media of people being reported and being taken off to jail, but you have to know your rights. If the next person does report you, you have to be confident and know that when I handle it, or when I go to the police, I can say, well, this is this, and just handle it, you know, because you know how you handle your child at home. Your child knows that. But it's just that fear stigmatism that we have going on there. And you have to raise your child like you know it's best.
And I think one thing I used to teach when I did the shaken baby prevention, and this goes to me for anything with your child, from the moment they're born till my oldest will be 40, and I still have to do this, is you take a deep breath and you calm yourself down before you deal with any issue. You know, whether it's something as simple as, you know, the toddler writing on the wall with the crayon, or the teenager that's lied to you about something. You get yourself collected and centered. You never hit or discipline your child in anger. You get yourself calmed down. And if you do that, you're going to be okay.
We're going to be back in just a moment with more Mother Knows Best. Stay with us. Welcome back to Good Day. We're talking now about an article that's trending, and this man has written an article. He starts it out by saying when he got married, he realized that marriage wasn't for him. it's kind of a bait and switch. He goes on to say he realized marriage wasn't for him because the marriage wasn't about him, that it was about serving the other person. But there are some people who have taken negatively to this article and said that some people in an abusive relationship might find this offensive or might find it kind of psychologically
dangerous.
wrong and dangerous. So we wanted to get our mother's opinions on it this morning. You read the articles, and what were your thoughts?
Well, first of all, the article, it was really well written. I couldn't quite understand all the negative press on it. But the advice that he was given was from his dad, before he was getting married. You know, just to before the wedding, realize you're not marrying her to make you happy. Your job is to make her happy. And I think now, of course, there are exceptions, and there's abuse and all that. But I think as a preparation for marriage, I think that's excellent advice. You know, I think the problem with a lot of marriages is we go into it for ourselves. You know, he completes me and she completes me and things like that. And that's not what it's for. It's for how can we help the other person be a better person.
Yep. For one thing, I thought that was just the best advice any dad can give his son the day of his wedding. When I read it, I could imagine him giving that advice to his son the day of the wedding, and I couldn't understand. I think people sometimes look too deep into it, and at the end of the article, I saw where the person who wrote the article, they said that you could tell that it exposed a lot of the people who looked at it negatively, their own personal fears that they were dealing with it, because marriage isn't really about that one person. And when you look at the divorce rate and why so many people are getting divorced today, it's because nobody is willing to compromise. And when you focus on the next person's need and that next person is focusing on your needs, it does balance out, as we were saying over the break. You know, when it comes to me and Travis, when you're married, you're going to knock heads. You're not going to agree with everything. And when you separate and you go to your corners and you take your breathers, the one thing that we've always been told by our pastors, one thing that we've always been told by our parents or anybody who counsels us, when you pray and ask God to give you wisdom, ask God to change you first. And then you come together. And once you work on you, and then you go to them, then that helps to help whatever the issue is come to a resolve. So that's why marriage isn't about you. It's about you making things better for the next person. When you become a parent, it's not about you. It's about you making things better for your child and having your child to have a better life for himself. And that's what that dad was saying. It's not about you. It's about your children that's coming up. It's about your in-laws. And that was perhaps the best advice ever. I would love to talk to that psychologist that had all of the negative. Are you married? How long have you been married? How many divorces have you talked to? Have you counseled, and what has been your success rate? Because this young man is starting off on the right level, and I see him being married for the next 80 years, and that being something that's not going to be a generational curse in his family as far as divorce. So I'm all for it. I think he did a wonderful job.
When you've been together 25 years, there are times that are better than other times, and I think one of the best pieces of advice we ever got is if you have to talk to your spouse about something, that it's not going to be the greatest thing for them to hear. Yeah. Think about how you're going to say that to them, and think about, would you want that said to you? And so many times I've changed my approach. And then this to me is perfect. Dr. Phil says happy marriage is about you both never fall out of love at the same time. Yeah. Because there are times in 25 years that I have to say I've always loved him, but I haven't always liked him. And there have been times I've thought, what was I thinking? But then the next morning he'll do something really sweet, and I'm like, okay, that's why I married him, and that's why I'm still here. And I'm sure I'm not the easiest person in the world to live with either. So it's all about balance, and it is about finding that middle ground where I do special little things for him, and he does them for me, and it all works out in the end.
We're going to be back in just a moment. I think Pat has brought some visual aids, so we're going to take a look at what she's brought. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Good Day. We've been talking this morning about marriage and this article that a man wrote on a blog. It's trending right now about, he said when he was first married, he quickly realized that marriage wasn't for him, but then he goes on to say that's because the marriage wasn't about him. It it was about serving the other person. And so we were trying to get our mother's opinions on that. And Pat, you actually brought some books that you thought were real good you'd like to recommend.
Yeah, I love to read, so I pulled some off my nightstand. But anyway, these two books, my husband's reading The Complete Husband by Lou Priolo, and I'm reading The Excellent Wife by Martha Peace, and they kind of dovetail. They're written by, obviously two different people, but really a good, healthy review of the roles of husband and wife. But this one also is really interesting, and I'm reading this one, Putting Your Past in Its Place. And I think a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this, a lot of times I will say, well, this is why I act, because this is how I was raised, or this is what's happened to me, and kind of just, shrug your shoulders. Well, this is it. This is what this is me. But then there's the other side of the camp that says, well, your past isn't important at all. You just need to forget about it and move on. And neither one of them is healthy, and you have to kind of come to a balance. Your past does shape you, but it doesn't define you. And so this really has helped me actually in my marriage, because I found myself just doing the same kind of responses all the time and thinking, that definition of insanity. And thinking, why isn't this working? Well, and this has really helped a lot. So yeah.
That's good.
Well, and if you go back to your wedding vows, you promised to do these things for better or worse, or sickness and in health. And my husband has had some real health issues, and especially recently, which has put me in a caregiver role, which has meant that now I'm the one that's doing more of the serving, but that's okay, because that's what's needed at this point. And you have to be willing to step in and do that. He's done that for me when I've had my times where I've not been as strong, where he stepped in and taken care of me. So I think that's what the journey's all about.
Are there certain things that have really helped you as you've been kind of dealing through that, kind of the changes that have been going on in your marriage? What's really helped you?
I think just thinking back over everything that we've been through together, and all the times he did help me and stood by me. And you get to know your husband so well, and when they're scared, and there's little things I try to do to make him not feel so scared about what's happening, and those kind of things. But it's just that love that we've built on, and the children, and I don't want to cry, but that it just makes your heart strong, and you can do it.
Bridget, what do you think?
I mean, I can totally feel what Pat is, not Pat, but Janet is talking about. Because I mean, Travis, he and I have been through a lot, and even with the past few weeks, you all know I haven't been feeling quite well, and we've been going back and forth to doctors. And one of the most touching things is the other night when I was sick to wake up, and he's on the side of the bed praying over me.
Aww.
And those are things people, they get married and they look at the frilly dresses and the flowers and the people coming to see you one day, and they're all happy about the better, but they forget about the worse. And worse will come, but God blesses you when you make it, even more when you make it through the worst. And when you've got a husband or a wife that's willing to stick by you through the worst, and when they're willing to have your back even when you're not being on your best behavior, or when you're not acting your best, and you're going to have those times when you're not in your best moods, but love conquers all, and that's that unconditional love, that's that godly love. And when you found a husband or a wife that's going to love you like Christ loved the church, you can make it through anything. And I think that's what that dad was trying to tell his son. Marriage isn't about you. It's about loving that person more than you love yourself. And that's why it's so important that you make it about them first and you second.
That's good. Lots of good things said today. We thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts on that, and thank you for sharing your story as well. And we do appreciate you guys all coming every Thursday to talk with us. And we're going to be back in the morning with more Good Day. If you guys have some topics that you would like the mothers to talk about, you'd like to hear their opinion, you can email us at mothers@wfxl.com. That's mothers with an S. And if you'd like to find out more about these ladies, you can go to mysouthwestga.com and click on the Good Day tab, and then click on Mother Knows Best, and you'll be able to find out all about them. And we hope you all have a wonderful Thursday. We'll see you back here at 5 a.m.